A guy named Rob emailed me. He was like, I have a spooky, scary story time about growing up in the Rio Grande Valley and lechuzas, which are witches that take the form of barn owls. He said he has a firsthand experience of one of these lechuzas. I'm sorry if I'm not saying that right. I don't speak Spanish, but I'm doing my best. Rob said he's 39 now, but when he was 8, he was at his grandparents' house in San Benito. He said the Rio Grande Valley, for anyone who's not familiar, is known for lechuza or lechuzas, which are these witches. He said Cameron County is very close to the Mexican border. So Rob's over there. He's playing in the yard, minding his own business. His uncle is babysitting him, and he said his uncle was kind of the town badass. He carried a pew-pew on him. And while Rob's playing in the yard, a barn owl, which was sitting in a 30-foot-high palm tree, swoops down at him and tries to grab him. His uncle pulls out his pew-pew and pew-pews at it. Owl is wounded. It flies over the Resaca, the water channel that divides their backyard from a large wooded area in farming fields. His uncle leaves him. He drives across to find the owl. He comes back a little while later and he brings the owl's claw with him, which he applies salt to in order to dry it, and he tells Rob to keep it as a keepsake. Rob said he only had the claw for one night. He put it in the window as instructed by his uncle in order for it to dry, but when he woke up in the morning, it was gone. He said that this wasn't uncommon. There were mice, there were things in the ranch land, so he just thought a mouse took it or his mom threw it away. Rob was a kid. He kind of forgot about it until years later when he was a teenager and he joined his uncle on a beach trip in Mexico. That was the night that his uncle told him the rest of the story. He said after he pew-pewed the owl, he chased it down and he found a trail of blood through the woods, which he followed. When he approached the owl, it let out a cry similar to Rob's cry when the owl swooped at him. That's not that uncommon for a predatory bird, but Rob says this is important later in the story. His uncle then pew-pewed the owl, put it in a sack, took its claw, and he kept the bird in the sack for the rest of the day. Later that day, after Rob's mom picked him up, his uncle went over to his buddy's house. He still had the sack with the bird in it in the back of his pickup truck. He spent the rest of the night at his friend's house. They were drinking. The bird was untouched, but the sack was tied. When he came out in the morning, the sack was untouched, but the sack was empty. He said it made no sense because if an animal had gotten it, the sack would have been torn, but the sack remained untouched, untied, but the bird was not in the sack. Rob's uncle said what happened next would haunt him for years to come. He said every single night after that day, the lechuza would come to him in his sleep at the windowsill and let out the same shrill cry as the day he pew-pewed it. It would flap frantically and scratch at the glass, but when his uncle looked at it, it had the face of an old woman. Most nights he was too terrified to fall back asleep, and this was strange for Rob's uncle because he said everyone in the town knew him and either feared him or respected him. This went on for several years until his uncle sought the help of a curandera. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but basically it's a witch healer. Rob says one day he came home with a little basket of cooked chicken, which the curandera told him to eat. He said he remembers his grandmother being confused and his mom making fun of his uncle because he was trying to meditate, which was something completely out of character for his uncle. He said he adopted a life of meditation after the curandera told him to cleanse himself. Rob's uncle eventually passed away from liver damage from a life of alcoholism, but Rob says he wonders if he would have drank less had he not been terrorized by the lechuza. Rob said I could use his real name. Let him know if you have comments or questions. And if anyone else has information about lechuzas or can provide more information, please let me know. I'm so curious about this. Keep sending me your spooky, scary stories. I'll keep adding them to this playlist.